The minute that Jane Roe emerged from anonymity in 1984 and revealed herself to be Norma McCorvey, the symbol developed complications. She was, it turned out, a drug addict and dealer, an alcoholic. She had dabbled in the occult. She is a lesbian.
I'm a former lesbian, former pro-abort, former Jane Roe. I'm a former lot. Seems like the older I get, the more former I come with everything. Which is cool with me because you never can get anywhere unless you've been somewhere. I've cheated people out of money. I've sold drugs. I was an abusive alcoholic for many, many years. I've done a lot against his teachings. But I think the far greater sin that I did was to be the plaintiff in Roe versus Wade. I'm Norma McCorvey, the former Jane Roe of the Roe versus Wade decision that brought legal child killing to America. I was persuaded by feminist attorneys to lie, to say that I'd been raped and I needed an abortion. It was all a lie. Since then, over 50 million babies have been murdered. I will take this burden to my grave.
Norma Leah McCorvey, born September 22nd, 1947. She left this life on February 18th, 2017. Norma was the Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade. In all of American history, it's arguable that the most controversial, divisive, and pernicious Supreme Court decision to have been handed down was Roe versus Wade, and its companion case, Doe versus Bolton, issued simultaneously on January 22nd, 1973. These two cases struck down the abortion laws of all 50 states. Roe versus Wade declared that abortion was a fundamental right and that an unborn child had no legal right to the protection of law. Doe versus Bolton defined a woman's health not just as her physical health, but a host of other definitions, such as her emotional and psychological well-being and the condition of her family, and by extension, her financial well-being. Roe and Doe effectively gave women and abortionists the cover that they needed to abort children through all 9 months of pregnancy without fear of criminal charges. The late Sandra Cano was the Doe of Doe versus Bolton. Norma McCorvey was the Roe of Roe versus Wade. Both of them converted to Christ, repudiated their belief in abortion, and sought to overturn the Supreme Court cases that bore their fictitious names. This film deals with Norma McCorvey, or Miss Norma, as many of us called her. I met Norma McCorvey for the second time in 1995, right after her conversion. Over the years, we became close friends, participating in multiple pro-life events together over nearly 2 decades, traveling to multiple cities, talking on the phone, emailing, texting. She even stayed with my family in our home for an entire month during a rough stretch in her life. We're going to share with you some of our memories of Norma's conversion to Christ, as well as her efforts and her legacy to end the killing of children by abortion in America. Norma's early life was chronicled by her in her first book, I Am Roe. I Am Roe is a heartbreaking record of a childhood marred by abuse, followed by years of self-destructive choices. Norma was born Norma Leah Nelson to Olin and Mary Nelson in Simmsport, Louisiana. Her father's mother was a prostitute who ultimately owned and operated a house of ill repute, which Norma visited to see her grandma. Norma's mother was physically beautiful, but cruel and extremely loose in her morals. When Norma was 10, her parents moved to Texas, where they separated and divorced when she was 13 years old. Her mother was verbally and physically abusive. She beat Norma ruthlessly for small childhood infractions. She locked her in a closet for hours. She verbally degraded her mercilessly, calling her vicious names. So Norma decided she needed to run away. She stole money from the till of a service station and with her 10-year-old friend ran away to Oklahoma. When they were apprehended by police and returned to Texas, a judge sentenced her to 1 year in a Catholic boarding school for girls. Norma testified that she was sexually molested by an adult female while she was there. During one of her many conflicts with authorities in the school, she exploded in rage at one of the nuns, who then sent her back to the sentencing judge. She was 11 years old. He sent Norma to a state reform school for girls in Gainesville, Texas, where she spent most of her time until she was 15 years old. Before her conversion, Norma wrote that those years in reform school were the best years of her life. She returned home for good at the age of 15, and the cycle of conflict with her mother started again. This time, her mother sent her to live with a distant male relative in Louisiana. In the 3 weeks that Norma was there, she tells of being raped by him every night until her mother came to visit and saw the horrific shape Norma was in. Norma told her mother everything. Her mother cussed out the man. The relative denied everything and called Norma and her mother whores. Sadly, her mother never pressed charges. She just took Norma home. Norma then started working as a roller skating waitress at an outdoor hamburger joint. It was while working there that she met her future husband, Woody McCorvey. Just after Norma turned 16, they were married. They moved to California. A few months later, when they found out she was pregnant, he beat her viciously, accusing her of being unfaithful, which she was not. Norma filed a complaint with the police and fled back to Texas, again moving in with her mother. She saw Woody McCorvey 2 more times, once at her mother's house while she was pregnant, and once more in the hospital after her baby girl was born. And she never laid eyes on him again. During her pregnancy, she started frequenting a lesbian bar for friendship and acceptance, and slowly became part of that social circle. When her baby girl was born, Norma hoped that she would become a good mother and raise her daughter with some level of normalcy. She never got the chance. Her mother, who was violently opposed to Norma's lifestyle, literally stole Norma's baby. She hid her from Norma and told the police that Norma was an unfit mother. Soon after, when Norma was back in her mother's house, tired and hungover, her mother tricked her into signing documents that legally granted custody of her daughter to her mother. Norma saw her daughter on and off over the years at her mother's whims. The next 4 years of Norma's life were a blurred kaleidoscope of drug abuse, alcohol abuse, odd jobs, carnival barking, drug dealing, and promiscuity with women and men. It was a tragic story of self-will run wild, resulting in 2 more babies being conceived. The first baby she immediately placed for adoption. The second baby, the Roe baby, she sought to abort.
A couple of years later, got pregnant again. Didn't want to have it. Didn't want it in my body. I wanted to kill it. I wanted to have an abortion. I went to an illegal abortion clinic in Dallas. I had $250 of my rent money saved up. There was nobody there. Well, I went to this attorney, and he treated me pretty much like a word I can't say anymore. He said that he just knew of these two young law students who had just graduated college, Sarah Weddington, Linda Coffey, and that they were trying to challenge the Texas statute on abortion. I mean, it just went right over my head. I mean, I didn't have a clue to what he was saying. And would I like to meet these two women? Sure.
We'll hear arguments in number 18, Roe against Wade.
After the Roe versus Wade decision, Norma lived in relative anonymity with her lesbian partner in Texas until Norma came out as the Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade. In 1989, NBC released a made-for-TV movie based roughly on Norma's life. The Norma character was played by Holly Hunter. That movie and the press surrounding Norma's coming out propelled Norma into the public eye, where she remained for the rest of her life.
My name is Norma McCorvey, aka Jane Roe. We must link arm in arm to protect and uphold the right to safe and legal abortion.
You were raped while you were in Georgia?
No, I wasn't.
As those years unfolded in Norma's life, I was founding and leading Operation Rescue, the largest peaceful civil disobedience movement in America's history. I was a guest on Oprah and Donahue and untold numbers of television programs. At that time, my name and the name of Operation Rescue were synonymous with pro-life activism and in-your-face controversy. On a personal note, to show how deeply antagonistic Norma's and my relationship was, the only pro-life group that she mentioned in I Am Roe was Operation Rescue, which I founded and led. The only pro-life leader she mentioned by name was me. The first time Norma and I came face to face was at a major pro-life protest we held in California. We were outside. Norma got as close to me as she could in the street and proceeded to blow a whistle in my ear with all her might, intermittently taunting and haranguing me. I in turn told her that she had blood on her hands, that millions of babies were dead because of her, that she would face the judgment of God, and that she should repent of what she had done and turn to Christ for forgiveness. And that is ultimately what she did. The path to her conversion was filled with miracles. It's a story so incredible that one is tempted to believe that it was written by and orchestrated by God Himself.
When I first met Miss Norma, when she really knew who I was in 1994, when she'd come out with the book, I Am Roe, which is a terrible book. It's a foul, filthy, awful book. But that's what she wrote. Those were her words, and that's what she was, just tremendously tormented. And you could see it through the words of the book. It'd make you feel bad. She had a book signing down in Dallas, Texas, and I came there. Now, there were police all over one side of the road. They weren't going to let me in. They knew who I was. They weren't going to let me in. So I'm on the other side of the road, and I cry out to her.
And he comes walking out of nowhere like God Himself, like the Messiah of all times. And he's got on his suit, and he's dashing. He looks great.
This is back in 1994. Norma McCorvey, as a result of what you have done, over 27 million little baby boys and girls have been slaughtered in this nation.
And he tells me this, and it crushes me.
she told me later, she said, I felt like I couldn't breathe. She couldn't, and she was gasping for air, and she left. She went out the back door, and she said, I've got to go. She didn't sign one book. So now, fast forward to 1995, we're moving Operation Rescue right next to A Choice for Women. We had satellite trucks all over the place. Time magazine puts this article, and it says, Roe meets rescue. There's going to be violence.
Operation Rescue with Flip Benham and company moved into the available space next door to the A Choice for Women abortion facility where Norma was working. And within almost days, it seemed, the folks with Operation Rescue were befriending Norma.
It didn't make any difference how much I stayed out in front of the mill, how much I cussed them, how much I screamed at them, how many heart attacks I had. They would just look at me and smile.
And then one day, I got in. It was early on a Saturday morning. Nobody was at the abortion mill. But she was there, and her truck was there, and she was there, and I was there. And I walked out of the car, and I was going into our office, and she came out of the door, and I looked at her, and I said, Miss Norma, what are we going to do? And we sat down at a little bench right out in front of that place with A Choice for Women right above. That was the office. And I said, Miss Norma, I want to apologize to you for what I said. I saw that those words hurt you deeply. And she said, and her eyes began to, puddle up with tears. She said, I just couldn't breathe. I just had to leave. I did not know that she left and went out the back. I thought she just went on and did what she did. And I said, Miss Norma, I'm sorry those words hurt you so much. I didn't mean to do that. I care about you and love you enough to tell you the truth.
That won my heart. I knew that he had a gentle side to him. I just didn't know how deep it went. That got me.
One of the volunteers was Rhonda Mackey. She had 2 little daughters.
There were 2 little girls, Emily and Chelsea. Emily was 7, Chelsea was 3. And they just loved her. And they said, Miss Norma, would you please take us to church? And she'd look at them and she'd say, how could I say no to these little beautiful children?
I told her, can you go to church with us on the day when I kept on asking her every day on like Wednesdays or Saturdays. Every day I was there, I asked her to go to church.
And I met 2 very enchanting children by the name of Emily and Chelsea Mackey. And they showed me that there was another way to live. And that way was to believe in God.
And so it was a Wednesday night, and Norma went with the Mackey family to the Hillcrest Church in Dallas, responded to the altar call, gave her heart to Jesus, and left. I mean, within, again, days, left the abortion industry because she had come to the saving knowledge of Jesus Christ.
Thank you for loving and setting me free. Thank you for giving your life just for me, how I met.
August 8th, 1995, Flip Benham on television baptized Norma, the Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade, who had left all of that behind with pro-life conversion, was baptized in a swimming pool.
Norma Leah McCorvey, I baptize you in the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit.
Hallelujah!
There she is! The old is gone, the old is buried, and the new has come, alive in Christ. My brothers and sisters, Miss Norma Leah McCorvey, born again.
When we came out of that water, believe me, when it happened, it was as if 30 years were taken off her life. And the beautiful smile on her face, and of course the incredulous smile on my own, even though nothing in her circumstances were changed, nothing in her situation, everything was different. Everything became different because Jesus entered into her heart.
The simple truth, the simple fact of history is that God used Operation Rescue, its leaders, and its foot soldiers to bring Norma to the Lord Jesus Christ. Wisdom is vindicated by her children. It was then that Norma and I became friends.
I really wanted Norma to go face to face with Randall Terry on that stage, a national venue. All the national media were there. And I will remember this for the rest of my life, as I think anyone who was present there will remember it.
Norma, there is someone who was way on the other side of the line from you during those years who would like to say and do something special for you.
I speak for all of us when we say, we forgive you in Jesus' name. Yes.
That hug and those kisses sent a message that, first of all, no one is beyond forgiveness, redemption, and welcome.
Norma's conversion to Christ and her repudiation of her stance on abortion, and the fact that she was now committed to overturning Roe versus Wade and making it a crime to kill unborn babies, all of that sent shockwaves through the pro-abortion community. They tried to play it off, but they were rattled.
Many people will wonder what impact this will have on the pro-choice movement. I don't think it should have any impact at all.
So Roe versus Wade has been here for 22 and a half years now. It's been 25 years since I first met Jane Roe. What I'm glad about is the case is there. It has meant choice for thousands of people. And whatever she says, whatever she does, it doesn't affect it.
All the players that are involved, you know, they're just mean-spirited, you know. They just, all they care about is getting that almighty dollar.
Yeah.
And that's all they care about. They don't care about the women.
Over the years, Norma's efforts to overturn Roe versus Wade and to save as many babies as she could took on many forms. She testified before Congress. She was arrested for peaceful protest at Notre Dame when President Obama spoke there. She was arrested protesting against the Sotomayor hearings for her appointment to the Supreme Court. She endorsed my campaign for the U.S. House of Representatives in '98, as well as 2012. And she was a part of the effort to overturn Roe versus Wade.
As a former Supreme Court plaintiff, I am entitled to the right to change my mind and to go back to the courts, even if I have to go to the Supreme Court, and ask them to reconsider Roe versus Wade.
Norma and Sandra Cano, who was Doe of Doe v. Bolton, those two women could file their own motions to set aside the judgment that brought legalized abortion to America. We presented over 5,000 pages of evidence, and the Supreme Court did not rule against Norma. They denied cert, which simply means we don't want to hear your case, and we're not going to. So it is not a ruling against her, but it says we're hardening our hearts. We used you once to make the law we wanted to make, and here you are again with massive evidence. We don't care.
Those of us who are pro-life leaders and pro-life activists know that our common fight to end the killing of babies brings us into contact with Christians from every denominational stream. We share a Trinitarian baptism and a desire to save babies from death and make it a crime once again to kill an unborn baby. Well, Norma, after her conversion to Christ, spent a lot of time with a lot of Christians, including Roman Catholic Christians. She was inquisitive. She was not afraid to ask questions, was not afraid to get into debates. And as time went on, she actually converted to the Catholic Church.
Father Robinson was her spiritual daddy who took her under his fatherly wing. And so when she felt drawn to the Catholic Church, and they weren't going to Mass yet, but they would have their catechism. He was the one giving them the catechism, preparing her for her confirmation, and they would have lunch and soup, and it was very cute.
So one day she comes to me and she says, well, Father, I had a dream, and God told me, you will be with me soon. I am calling you home. Now, again, this was like early 98. And she said, what's that mean? What is God trying to tell me? And I said to her, Norma, I don't know. Ask him. Just ask him. God will let you know what it means. So, I don't know, a month or so later, she gets back to me and says, Father, now I know what it means. He means I'm called to be a Catholic.
So, August 17th, 1998, at St. Thomas Aquinas in Dallas, Texas, I was there with some of my young children, and Norma was received into the Catholic Church. Father Frank was homilist and confirmed her, and Father Robinson gave her first Holy Communion, and it was just absolutely beautiful.
After Norma's conversion, she and I became friends, and over the years, we became close friends. We spent a lot of time together, and she had a decent group around her, people who loved her and who she loved, people who saw sides of her that other people didn't get to see. And all of us can tell you that being in a friendship with Norma was like being on a roller coaster at points. And at times, the roller coaster would go off the tracks. But in the end, we stayed friends.
And so one time when Women of the East came down to Texas, she said, okay, I've had it, girl. We're going to get a cowboy hat and boots. I'm going to make a Texan out of you. And so we had the funniest time going shopping, and she tried all kinds of hats on me and, and tried on different kinds of cowboy. I still have the hat and cowboy boots, by the way. If I had to pick a word to describe Norma, it would be feisty. She was very feisty. She had her own opinion about things, couldn't change her mind about too much.
One time, Norma showed up with 3 big bags full of clothes from the local department store and was like, look, baby girl, I got you covered. And so we go through and we try these things on. I was so flattered. She thought I was 2 sizes smaller than I am. But I squeezed into them. All kinds of glitz. And she told me I had beautiful eyes. We're driving down to downtown D.C. to do some protest or something, and she's telling me how beautiful my eyes are. I was so touched that I did my eye makeup nicely. I grew up with 7 brothers, so to be told that I looked pretty in my makeup and that I had nice eyes meant the world to me. Later on, I'm pregnant, and she sends me maternity clothes. Not baggy maternity clothes. I mean, you got to cover the baby, but they were cool. Black sweatshirt, black and gray stripes, and black pants to go with it. I felt cool being pregnant in those clothes. And then Margaret's born, and she sends me cute clothes, bows for the hair, everything. I mean, to be loved is all you really want in life. And she did that for me as a friend. I can't be more thankful.
There's many times that she would call me and say, Hector, I feel led to pray for you. I just feel something in my spirit. Something is wrong with you. I need to pray with you. During times of my own hardship, there were times that she would render support and love and encouragement and would speak life to me at times when I had my own adversities in my life and raising my children and the ministry and so forth.
I was in labor at the hospital, and Norma accompanied me with their prayers. They were outside of my room praying the rosary while I was in labor, about to deliver my son, Mike. And Norma was one of the first ones to hold my baby after he was born.
This is what I really loved, everybody loved about Norma, was her humanity. We're talking about a real human being. Everybody wanted to put her up on a pedestal. Everybody wanted to make her a celebrity. And she enjoyed the limelight. Come on, any of us who knew her, anybody does. When you're on stage, when people are giving you applause and adulation, it's human nature. That was also part of her humanity. But she was raw. She was raw in her humanity, unpretentious. You didn't have to guess what she was thinking because she would tell you in no uncertain terms. I mean, there was nothing oblique, nothing politically sensitive, nothing, deferential. It was like raw.
She loved to be sensational. She loved to be shocking. She loved to be contrary. I think she liked to be contrary. She's, I know she wasn't technically born in Texas, but she was a true Texan. She was hard-headed and she spoke her mind.
She had a little bit of mischievousness to her because she'd like to say things just to push a button once in a while. And she'd like to say something it's like sticking electrodes to a frog. Let's just do this and see how he jumps.
But I remember her coming up to me and saying, and I rarely get these kinds of compliments, she said, you're looking really dapper. Something like that. You're really looking dapper. And she said, you better be glad I'm not hunting men, or I'd put my hands on you. Now I'm a minister, okay? So a clergyman instantly blushes, and I remember feeling the capillaries in my face nearly exploding, and she got such a kick out of that. She just loved humiliating me.
Norma was the kind that said, this is who I am. If you like me, that's fine. If you don't, then going down the road. And I remember one time her saying to me about somebody that was mad at her. And she said, I made these people mad the other day. And she said, but you know what? They got a whole lifetime to get glad again. So that's the way it is.
She was loved and cared for. I don't know how many people, I don't know anyone who has a network of friends that just take them in and take care of them. You might have one or two, but to have a whole network across the country. That was an unusual situation, but Norma was an unusual person. Norma McCorvey was a great lady.
The record of Norma being used and abused as a child is extensive and it's heartbreaking. That pattern of being used and abused went into her adult life as she became known as the Jane Roe of Roe versus Wade. The pro-abortion community used her. But even after her conversion, that pattern was something that she was constantly on guard against.
Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey, the two attorneys back in 1969 that met with her on Greenville Avenue in a little pizza parlor, and they were looking for a little lady to be the name on a class action suit called Roe versus Wade. Sarah Weddington treated her like a piece of trash, but so did Patricia Ireland and what's her name, Kate Michelman, and all of those ladies, those Vassar yup-yups, they couldn't stand that little lady from the other side of the tracks who was attempted suicide, was a drug addict, was lesbian, and a lot of lesbian relationships, and just an embarrassment to them. They couldn't stand her. They could have cared less about her, and Norma made that very clear in I Am Roe and One by Love, her two books.
When this Roe versus Wade thing all started, and Sarah Weddington and Linda Coffey took advantage of her, they were looking for somebody just like her. And Norma told me that. She said, I figured out later on they wanted me just like I was. Easy to control, easy to manipulate. They're professionals, they're educated, they had all the things I didn't have. And, she told me, she said, I was living in Lee Park. So she was literally homeless when all this thing started. And they knew that. And they knew she could be taken advantage of.
She actually felt used and misled by her own attorneys in the original Roe v. Wade case. Nobody explained to her what abortion actually was. Of course, no counseling. Norma, of course, ended up not even getting an abortion. And really all she went to these people was, do you know a place I can get an abortion? But they were looking for a white woman, probably low income, that they could set up as a good test case.
She was taken advantage of. Sarah Weddington was cued into her, because actually she did look to see if she could get an abortion. Of course, in Texas, she couldn't. And then she decided, okay, that wasn't going to work. But then Sarah Weddington heard about her and met her for lunch. I mean, Norma was hungry, and she said, I signed that document over a pizza lunch. And then she never heard from Sarah Weddington, really, over the years it took. And Sarah Weddington knew darn well that she couldn't really help her. Even though Sarah Weddington herself had had an abortion herself and knew how she got an illegal abortion, so she knew if she really wanted to help her get an abortion, she could have done that. But she didn't. They were looking for someone to take advantage of, to work a case to legalize abortion, and Norma got duped into it, basically, over lunch because she was hungry. Oh, I had pizza.
All I was just a simple little girl from Louisiana who thought she knew what she wanted. They wanted to change a law. I wanted to have an abortion. They said, Norma, don't you want to exercise your rights by having control over your own body? Yes, I said. Well, all you have to do is sign here on this dotted line. I signed it March the 7th, 1970. I wanted to have an abortion. I saved up my rent money. I went to an illegal abortion clinic here in Dallas, Texas. I saw the conditions of that clinic. I saw the dry blood on the floor. I saw all the roaches and all the other creepy things crawling around the floor. The only thing that stopped me was the fact that the clinic had been busted a week before that. That was the only thing that stopped me.
So you felt that you were manipulated by the lawyers?
Yes.
But you went to the lawyers, didn't you?
The lawyers came to me. I was told by the attorney who was going to be handling my adoption case for the baby I was wanting to abort that there were two women who were freshly out of law school who wanted to overturn the Texas statute on abortion. We met. They misled me.
One time we all went together to a debate of Randall Terry and Sarah Weddington. And that was at SMU, and it was in 2002. So we were sitting with Norma, and kind of, it was an interesting evening. It was definitely a lively debate. At the end, questions were invited. And to my surprise, Norma stood up to ask a question. And I thought to myself, this is going to be really interesting. And it was. Norma challenged Sarah on how she'd been used by her and the things that had happened between the two of them, and was really very unhappy, very upset. And I was expecting her to say to Norma, gosh, I'm sorry, or gosh, I've thought about that, and I meant to talk to you about it, something that was reconciliatory. And not at all. Sarah just didn't give her even the scintilla of compassion.
When these people from Operation Rescue call me at home now, they don't say, hey, Norma, I wanted you to come down to the office, or hey, Norma, we're having a fundraiser. You can get in and we're going to introduce you. We're going to acknowledge the fact that you're there, but we don't want you to speak because you're a loose cannon, and we don't want really loose cannons around, but we really do need you there because you're Jane Roe and we don't have any other choice. So go figure.
You're saying that's the way you were used by the pro-choice movement?
Yes, sir.
She not only had a lot of guilt and so forth over the abortion issue herself, and the fact that she felt somewhat responsible for the deaths of all these children, but she felt like she had been hoodwinked. She felt like she had been taken advantage of.
But what if they tried to turn you into some kind of a symbol? What if they tried to use you now the way that some people feel you were used by the choice movement before?
We've already talked about that at great length, and there will not be any exploitation of my political status.
Who's we?
The right to life people.
She was used by the pro-choice movement, and I'm not sure I want this anywhere, but she was used on this side too.
Norma was a dire pro-lifer, but there were times she really felt used. And I think that just goes to show that if you don't have the personal element, you have nothing. It doesn't matter how pro-life you say you are if you don't have that element. And pro-lifers aren't perfect. So the people she was going to speak for weren't perfect. And none of us are. She was not perfect. They aren't. But she felt it when that friendship wasn't there, even if the money wasn't there for a speaking fee, to acknowledge the fact that she was giving of her time and giving of her person. It's a horrendous feeling to have to describe what the abortion industry is, and then the conversion. And Norma gave of herself when she talked about her story.
As her daughter, Melissa, was to my left and her granddaughter was across, I said to all of them, I said, any wounds, any hurts, any ways that she may have felt exploited, I said, I want to, on behalf of everyone, but especially the pro-life movement, I want to ask for your forgiveness. We're sorry, and will you please forgive us?
As the years rolled on prior to Norma's conversion, and after she spent several years working in several abortion mills, the thought of babies being murdered right there in the building where she worked, in part because of her role in Roe versus Wade, began to disturb her deeply. After her conversion, her role in Roe versus Wade began to haunt her even more intensely at points. One can barely imagine the weight of guilt that she bore in her soul.
So after Norma had given her heart to Christ and all of her sins were forgiven and cast into the sea of forgetfulness, as far as the east is from the west, they were removed from her, which is forever, there was still torment inside of her.
It was smoke, 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 pot, 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 take pills, drop acid, do masculine, do anything you can get your hands on. That was pretty much how I wanted to stay all the time. Just stoned.
She knew who she was, and she wasn't always happy with who she was, and that was a problem. That was a sad thing to see.
The definition for abortion hit me in the face. I could see little babies being pulled out of their mamas, but they were alive. That's what I lived with for the better part of 14 years.
It's one thing to know God has forgiven you and receive his mercy, but it's harder to forgive yourself. And I think that was the thing that Norma always struggled with.
She had literally told me, I know God's forgiven me, but I just can't forgive myself. And I said, Norma, wait a minute. You need to think about what you're saying there. If you're telling me that God has forgiven you, but you can't forgive yourself, then what you're telling me is you have higher standards than he does, right? Because he can forgive you, but you can't. I said, you need to think about that, because you're putting yourself up on a pretty high pedestal there when you sit there and tell me that my standards are higher than God, so he can forgive me, but I can't. But last summer when I talked to her, she wasn't totally beyond that, but you could tell that she was kind of making some progress. She was becoming more and more at ease and more comfortable with her situation.
For years and years, I used to think that it was a woman's right to choose, period. But after working in 4 abortion clinics here in the Dallas area and learning a lot more, I started having inner conflicts with myself, Ted, and I really got extremely depressed when women would call into the clinics and want to make appointments for second trimester abortions. I'm proud to know that I don't have to go into another abortion clinic and watch women come out of abortion procedures crying and wanting to call their mothers. I don't have to look at dismembered bodies of children who've been ripped out of their mother's wombs. I don't have those nightmares anymore. I refuse to have those nightmares.
I don't have nightmares like I used to. I normally sleep a full night's sleep now, but I don't know, it's something that you'll never forget once you see it.
Yes.
It's like a big nightmare.
2 times in her life when she noticed a children's playground empty, and it struck her. At first she didn't know why it was bothering her so much, but she always lived with this, there was this tinge of guilt, of even after she accepted the new life in Christ so radically that the very first time I did an interview with her, I said, "So, you're the Jane Roe of Roe v. Wade." And she said, "No, Father, I used to be the Jane Roe, but she's been laid to rest. I am a new creation in Christ." So she had a great awareness of that new life in Christ that we all share. But at the same time, we're human. The wound persists in some fashion. And so seeing an empty playground, who would look at an empty playground and get the thought across their mind, "Oh, it's my fault"?
She said, Pastor Flip, every time I go by an empty playground, I just see that the children aren't there, and I'm reminded of what I did, and I can't even look to God anymore without shame.
I just started praying to God to ask him to forgive me for helping Weddington and Coffee with the abortion, with the Roe versus Wade stuff. And I wrote empty playgrounds. I sat across from the playground that I had visited that eve with a small child, and that small child was Emily.
I sit across from a playground. I visited today with a small child. I know of such places where children play, but sadly there's none of them here today. Empty playgrounds all around, playful children not to be found.
She also told me a story once that she heard the sound of children's feet running through the abortion clinic where she worked before she gave her life to Christ. And of course she said, what is that? What is that? And she looked and there was nothing.
The freezer where the parts, where body parts were kept, and she had this eerie feeling. She never wanted to go back there where the freezer was, and she felt like if she had to go back there, she had to go back there to replace a light bulb or whatever. She felt like that the freezer was going to open, and like the babies were going to pull her in there, and the door would be slammed shut, and she'd be in the cold freezer. These are the things that the human mind does to you when you're involved in baby killing.
She heard lots of things. Believe me, there were lots of demons that we were dealing with, all sorts of things that go into a place where they're murdering babies. You know that they're there. And she saw things that shouldn't be seen. She experienced things that are just beyond anything that we can explain in the physical, but they're very real.
We don't know the horrors that people go through when they get involved in this abortion industry. It's terrible.
But in the years when you worked in the abortion clinics, you thought it was okay, didn't you? What were the reasons for you thinking then that it was okay? How did you justify it to yourself then?
I justified it, Tim, mostly every night with several pictures of margaritas, if you really must know, because I needed a job.
Simply that?
That's it.
In Norma's early life, she was a heavy drug user, a heavy drinker. She smoked her entire life. And these behaviors took a toll on her body. But make no mistake, as she drew near to death, she drew near to God.
Got to spend very precious moments with Norma, her last days, holy ground. One of the things I was very blessed to be able to do as well was to bring, Norma's Catholic, I'm Catholic, to bring the prayers of the church to her bedside during these hours. Chaplets of Divine Mercy, what I call mercy songs, The Lord's My Shepherd, Lord, I Need You, Hosea, those kind of songs. And the Rosary, of course. She said, I don't want to die. But then she said, but I want to leave here. I want to go. And so to be at bedside with her and to be able to encourage her to say, Norma, the Lord loves you so much, and you are in the palm of God's hand.
To see her, when we would pray for her, the rosary or the chaplet, she would be trying to bless herself. I mean, she was weak.
We could tell she was looking and seeing something or someone we could not see. But she reached up with her arms, and her hands were just like this, as if she was putting her hands around the neck of someone who was reaching and embracing her. She went from, where are the babies? She's concerned about the babies. Where are the babies? To, look at all the babies. Norma said this. And then she had progressed from, I don't want to die, to, I'm ready. I'm ready. I want to go home. She would say, I want to go home. And I would say, you will be going home. And we talked about, that she would see Father Robinson and they would be together. And again, as I'm sitting next to her, she's clear as day. She's looking straight ahead, and she said, look at these two babies right here in front of us. Of course, I didn't see them, but she just reached and embraced. And I'm like, Lord, you are so amazing. Found out from a friend who was there with the family, the songs that I had sent, these prayer songs, they had put the phone on Norma's heart so that the songs were playing, the prayers were being prayed on her heart, and she died of heart failure. So as she took her last breath, she was accompanied by those mercy songs and prayers.
After Norma McCorvey left this life, the Washington Post ran a story, and the final quote of the story was a quote from over 20 years ago, when Norma said that she regretted the fact that she was never able to obtain an abortion. This was deliberate deceit, casting an aspersion on Norma's character, on her conversion, and on her convictions. Norma left this life as a devout Christian, as an ardent pro-lifer, and we need to remember her in that light.
If Norma was still alive, she would want everyone to know that she did everything in her life that was possible to reverse Roe v. Wade. She went on TV, she went on radio, she traveled around the world, she spoke, and she did legal actions, including going to the Supreme Court itself saying, this is wrong, stop it, reverse my case. She'd want to be remembered as the woman who tried to stop abortion, not as the woman whose case was used by the legal establishment to bring abortion to America.
One thing that is irrefutable is the fact that she did give her life to the Lord, and that she became a champion for the pro-life movement. And many have come to the Lord because of her. Many children, only in heaven will we know how many children were saved because of her incredible testimony. Whether she is a perfect human being or not is irrelevant, for the word declares that we all fall short of the glory of God. Whether she was passionate at one end or passionate for the other, ultimately she chose life. If anyone reflects upon her life, that they're not blinded by any of the negative events that may have occurred in her life, but rather to reflect on the positive events of her life.
God used her so powerfully in the last 22 years of her life. I was so thankful. So the first 47 years, she was on the wrong side of history. She was on the wrong side of eternity. She gives her heart to Christ, and now she's on the right side of history. And thank God right now, she's really on the right side of eternity.
May her memory be an inspiration to all of us until we see that day when Roe v. Wade is overturned and the full protection of law is restored to every unborn baby in America, just like Norma wanted.
Ladies and gentlemen, Norma McCorvey.
Carnival queen, flashing your Texas grin, stumbling in the haze of a gypsy dream. Can't remember where you've been. You went round it, up and down, flashing inside of your skin. Paid the boatman's toll, nearly lost your soul as you came to the river's edge. It was a cold day in hell. Half-smoked packs of cigarettes, 6 shots and a pitcher of beer could not drown the haunting sound that echoed in your ear. Rachel weeping at the